But, ultimately what we do know for Oklahoma is in this upcoming season, they have to have a better offensive performance than they had last season. It's no excuse. They absolutely have to have a better offense than they had a season ago. Um, the offense was atrocious, and we know for many reasons. Whether it be play call or obviously the issues that they had with injuries, and then you had some performance issues, but I don't think that was really as much of the issue. So I think I think the biggest issue for Oklahoma, one of the biggest issues. Sorry, I was trying to type something out here real quick. But I think one of the biggest issues for Oklahoma obviously was the offensive line. We talked about this just I think it was last week, or it might have been on Tuesday. We talked about it where I was talking about how if I were to take my list and put the three things that I hope Oklahoma, maybe not really concerns, but the three things for Oklahoma that I want to go really well, my concerns ranked 1 through 3 would be corners, and I guess overall DB, but I'm going to pick the corners specifically, and then offensive line, then wide receiver. And that's kind of the way that I go down the list, because I don't think I'm worried about the injury prone aspect of the wide receiver corps, but I'm not too worried about what performance we can see from the wide receivers. And then you go to the offensive line. I'm worried about what that might look like when it comes down to the injury side of things, because we're Oklahoma fans and we remember last season. But I'm not as concerned for what I believe that this offense can put together, especially from what we were hearing out of spring football, which we didn't hear last season, which is that this offensive line is actually performing really well against a great defensive line. So I think that there is all the potential in the world for this offensive line to turn things around big. And I'm not even asking for a monumental turnaround, which I think it has to be. It's going to be. Even if they just turn it around a little bit, it's going to look monumental. But, I think this offensive line has to turn around. And one of the biggest guys that I think can really turn things around is it's going to be a transfer that Oklahoma got in, and that transfer is Derek Simmons. I don't know if Derek Simmons will start. I really don't know. But if Derek Simmons were to start, I think he can be a critical player for Oklahoma in the 2025 season. It's a guy, I believe, out of Jacksonville, North Carolina. He's a big dude, 6'5", 6'6", depending on how you measure him, 320 pounds. A huge offensive lineman who also shows a lot of agility, and he shows that capability to be that big man, but then also be athletic. And I think that's what's really important about Derek Simmons. So I look at Derek Simmons when he first came in. I was really excited. I think that this is a guy, when you go back and see what he was capable of doing, again, talking about kind of that ability and what he's got in terms of size and his big old frame, and then you talk about just his overall athletic ability and what he's able to do there. It's really special, and that's what Oklahoma needs, and that's what Oklahoma used to have, and Bill Bedenbaugh's used to getting those guys in. I thought about instead possibly putting in maybe Foje, Febechi Wiwu would be another one. Who's the other freshman that I'm drawing a blank on, or 5-star man, but drawing a blank on the name. But anyways, I think that there's a lot of guys you can look at. I just think that Derek Simmons, another reason is that he played both tackle and guard throughout his career, and specifically back in high school. So whenever he was in high school, he's a guy that's versatile. He can play in multiple roles if you need him to, which is huge for an Oklahoma offensive line that needed something like that last season. And we saw that from a couple of guys, but this is a guy that could do it at a high level. And he started all 10 games. I believe this was last season. He started all 10 games that he played on the offensive line. He registered 612 offensive snaps last season, allowing 0 quarterback sacks and 417 pass block snaps, according to PFF. So, I mean, that's incredible. 417 snaps that he took last season were passing plays where he had to drop back into pass block coverage and he didn't allow a single sack. That's absolutely incredible. That shows again. I know he hasn't gone against SEC talent, but that's still a very special stat to have for an offensive lineman. And that's the problem with trying to evaluate an offensive lineman as a fan, is that you can't really look him up like you would a quarterback. For me, if I'm looking up a quarterback, the biggest thing that I look at is touchdown to interception ratio. Then I want to see what he was throwing in his yardage and what's his average yardage. How far did he throw it downfield? And I want to look at things like that, completion percentage. But for an offensive lineman, which I think PFF does a really good job of compiling different stats for the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, guys like that. But there's not really a whole lot that you can look at from the stats. So you really have to go back and look at what he's doing. And again, that big frame with the athletic ability, he shows a lot of potential, and I think that carries over just fine. So I think that's going to be just fine. By the way, Fusi too. I see Modern Day Caveman jumps in the chat. I saw that pop up, and that was the name. And I had it in my brain too, and it just wouldn't escape. He said, "Offensive line was a tragedy. BV doesn't have the luxury anymore of redshirting or benching elite players that are freshmen or sophomore like Fusi, Foje, EPL, etc. Out of loyalty for mediocre upperclassmen." Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think this season you have to go with that, right? You just have to put the best guys out there. And that's what I'm trying to say is I think Oklahoma has enough, especially when you've got guys that transferred in. I think Oklahoma's got enough to where they can kind of play around with that just a little bit. And that's where I think it's really important for this offensive line going forward. And you think of I was looking at this today too, and thinking about who all they have with Troy Everett, Fabechi Wiwu, Eddie Pierre Louis, which you mentioned, Modern Day Caveman, and also Michael Fasusi. Then you even got guys like the guy I'm mentioning, Derek Simmons, Ryan Foje, another freshman, but still a guy that we believe can be something special. And you've got Logan Howland, you've got Josh Iasosa. The list goes on. Jacob Sexton's still around. So, you've got guys that are still around that have some, another transfer, Luke Beklenko, who was a guy that came in for Oklahoma. So I think there's a lot of potential in this offensive line, but who's going to be that anchor piece and who's going to be that guy to really help keep this entire offensive line grounded? And that's where I think Derek Simmons can be that guy. I think he can be the guy that if you need somebody to pick up that block, you run behind him. And I really hope that he can be that guy. I think right now he would be projected as a starter. I don't know why he wouldn't be. He's a redshirt senior. This would be his last year of a potential play, and Oklahoma tried really hard to get him out of the portal. So there's a lot with Derek Simmons that I think is important. And of course, trying to block for your running backs. You think of just really anybody in the backfield. You got John Mateer back there. Even if Michael Hawkins has to come in for some reason, or even if he's just in at the end of the game, you got to block for him. You got to block for your running backs. You got Jaden Ott and Javonte Barnes, Taylor Tatum, Xavier Robinson. So you've got guys that you've got to block for, and adding a guy like Derek Simmons, I think, is really good for that. He had all-state honors in high school. He's a guy that I don't think he was recruited very highly at all. I don't think he had any major offers, but he still brings something to the table, and I think his experience at a lower level can really help build that foundation to get him up to a higher level.